In this episode of Uraga Garifuna, we will discuss with you the atrocities unleashed upon the Garinagu by the British as they sought to colonialize our ancestral homeland of Yurumein, now known as St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We will also discuss the banishment of the Garinagu to the island of Roatan, Honduras, and their quest to survive in their new home country. And finally, their search for muйasu, refuge, tranquility, peace, and acceptance as they integrated into the Belizean Society. Indeed, this is the story of our people during the period 1763 to 1823. As I mentioned before, this story commences in 1763 on Yurumein, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Up to that time, St. Vincent was one of the two strongholds of the Garinagu people in the Lesser Antilles of the Caribbean. The other stronghold was Dominica. St. Vincent is known for its hilly terrain, lush green forests, abundant wild and marine life, and clear waters. It is ocean and sea nestled between the Atlantic Ocean on the east and the Caribbean Sea on the west. But at some point in 1763, something transpired that would have a significant effect on the Garinagu on St. Vincent.
The Treaty of Paris in 1763 ended the 7 Years' War between the British and a French-Spanish coalition. As part of the treaty, the island of St. Vincent was ceded to the British by the French. Because of previous experiences with the Garinagu in other parts of the Caribbean, the British came with the outright hostility and engaged the Garinagu in military skirmishes between 1763 and 1772. The British idea was to colonize the island and displace the Garinagu from their lands. In 1772, open warfare was declared and raged on until 1773. This was referred to as the First Carib War. At the end of that war, the British were defeated. But in their quest for peace, the Garifuna leaders signed a treaty with the British where the Garinagu retained their rights to exist as an independent nation, but ceded some of their lands to the British on St. Vincent.
We have heard that at the end of the First Carib War, the British received land as part of the treaty signed. However, when France declared war on Britain in 1779, the Garinagu joined the forces with the French and took back control of the lands that were ceded to the British. Once again, the island was controlled by the Garinagu. However, that would not last very long.
The British were relentless in their desire to take full control of the island of St. Vincent. And in March 1795, they declared war on the Garinagu. This war is known as the Second Carib War. At the beginning of this war, Unfortunately, the paramount chief of the Garinagu, Joseph Chatoyer, was killed on March 14, 1795. But due to the combative skills of the Garinagu and using guerrilla warfare strategies under the leadership of Chief Chatoyer's brother Duvaye, the war dragged on until June 1796, when the Garifuna forces surrendered.
Having been defeated and the British knowing that the Garinagu has a fighting spirit, the decision came down that the Garinagu were to be displaced at any cost. Their villages were burnt as men, women, and children were hunted down and gathered to start the process of what would be the next course of atrocity that the British would mete out to the Garinagu.
The ill-fated order to exile the Garinagu from their native homeland of St. Vincent and the Grenadines was communicated by General Abercrombie on behalf of the British government. As a result, during the period July 1796 and March 1797, Garifuna men, women, and children were forcibly taken and kept in confinement on a desolate, barren island sitting on steep cliffs located in the most eastern Grenadine island, miles from St. Vincent in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. An island only fit for reptiles to live, by the name of Balisaw. While there were different reports of the exact figure, it is known that the number was between 4,195 and 5,200 Garinagu who were banished from St. Vincent to Balisaw.
The Garinagu were kept on Balisaw for 8 months. Approximately half the number of those who were confined on Balisaw died, either by committing suicide by jumping off the cliffs of Balisaw, or as a result of the epidemic that spread within their numbers. On March 3, 1797, the remaining 2,700 Garinagu were loaded onto a convoy of British battleships and banished forever from their native homeland.
Article 2, Item B of the 1951 definition of genocide by the United Nations states that acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such, causing serious bodily or mental harm to the members of the group. No doubt, the intention and the resulting effect can only be regarded as the British committing genocide on the Garifuna people in 1797.
Having loaded its human cargo into crammed spaces on 11 ships, the convoy set sail to Roatan, Honduras, some 1,500 miles west of St. Vincent.
The journey from Balisaw to Roatan took a little over 1 month. After a brief stop in Jamaica, the convoy arrived at Port Royal, Roatan, Honduras, on April 11, 1797. Although Honduras became the final selection for the destination of the exiled Garinagu, it is worthy to note that Africa and a desert adjacent island were also considered for the banishment of the Garifuna people by the British.
No doubt the trip to Roatan was one wreaked with major discomfort and inhumane circumstances. Only 2,026 Garinagu arrived, the others having died and some captured aboard one of the ships by the name of Prince William Henry. However, undaunted and unbroken by their circumstances, a large number of Garinagu did not stay on Roatan.
Roatan does not have arable farmlands and did not appeal much to the majority of exiled Garinagu. So on May 19, 1797, a little over a month after their exile to Roatan, they formally surrendered to the Spanish authorities and implored them to take them away from Roatan to Trujillo on the Honduran mainland. Upon arrival at Trujillo, the commandante of the military post was impressed that most of the men and many of the boys had some familiarity with the use of weapons.
The Garinagu are seafaring people, and it is known that by 1802, 150 of them were recruited to be employed in the logwood cutting camps on the British Honduran settlement now known as Belize.
Yes, as early as 1802, Garifuna laborers were brought onto the British settlement, and with the lifting of a ban against the hiring of Garinagu in 1827, loggers on the settlement were allowed to hire more Garinagu. By now, they were known to be among the best laborers around.
From the sequence of events, it can be seen that between 1797 and 1827, the Garinagu were already plying between Roatan, Trujillo, and the British settlement. In 1823, because of their military prowess, they joined the forces of Royalist Spain, who were at war with the Ladinos of Honduras. This was a war of freedom for Central America from the Spanish domain, which subsided until 1832.
The Spanish royalists, whom the Garinagu supported, eventually lost the war. It was the impact of this war that resulted in the Garinagu seriously taking the step of migrating in large numbers from Honduras to what was then known as the British settlement and now known as Belize.
In 1823 was the first time a large group of Garinagu attempted to settle in Belize as permanent settlers.
On Monday, March 31st, 1823, Mr. Alejo Beni, his four comrades, and his cousin, Mr. Benito Beni, their interpreter, met the superintendent of the settlement, Major General Edward Codd. Codd hesitated at first, but eventually gave Beni permission for a large group of Honduran Garinagu to settle on the settlement, now known as Belize. They returned to Honduras on April 1, 1823, and arrived in Honduras on April 3, 1823. They returned to Belize on Wednesday, November 19, 1823, to permanently settle.
This reenactment is a depiction of the arrival of a large group of Garinagu in 1823 to the then British settlement now known as Belize. At the time of the arrival of this group of Garinagu, the British settlement was governed by the British and headed by a superintendent by the name of Superintendent Codd. The borders of the settlement at the time of the arrival of the Garinagu were north at Roatan River and south at the Suboon River. The Garinagu were seeking refuge on the British settlement because of oppression they suffered in Honduras.
Luago, isu budang le wong ngebela watu. Amuri hena luma le agabu te wani fulas. Megatina apa giri gere la frago ni ngai lu. Grunel. La fulas. Lengen pon. Ngebela watu. Ayana kata. Wani Wagirigia, Anuha Nuguchu. Numari, Nuta Numari, Taguria, Taguroha Abairahu, Lauflessing, Ubahuma, Wom, Hama, Wadik.
Who are these strange people coming to our shores? Could you tell me who they are, please? They look African.
Superintendent, they are Caribs, but they refer to themselves as Garinagu.
Didn't we send them to Honduras? Aren't they there? Why are they here?
Superintendent, the leader says that they have been traveling for many days. He has his mother, he has his wife is pregnant. All they want is peace and tranquility. And so he is requesting if him and his people can settle on these shores.
Well, I don't think so. I think we should send them away. We don't want these people here. Just get rid of them, will you?
Amarengo Brunello, Kilo, Mishumela Lugar, Lo, Adagar, yeah.
Kage, Waduro Belu Binafi Lane, Siabela, Lisu Umagong, Gamalumon, Wagara Gobin.
Superintendent, he's saying that he does not accept what you're saying, but notwithstanding, he will go back and talk to his people and decide what they will do.
About time.
And so, we know that the superintendent did not give approval, and so Alejo and his people will return and we'll see whether or not the superintendent will consider otherwise on their second return.
The group of Garinagu requesting permission to settle is led by Alejo Beni. Alejo Beni is accompanied by Vincent Lino, Remalda Lewis, Ellis Martinez, and Alejo Lambe, and others.
Mama Grigia how would Gerebe, Bagufulas, Angela Barini, Womutu Waigu, Womuti, Wania Ganis, Anuha Baru, Waigu, Wamuri here Fulas, Lababa Kunabu, Love Fulesi, Taguri Hanu Balu Gurilehi, make it to Huma Bravo, Love Fulesi. Love Fulesi,
Are these the same people who were here shortly? Have they come back again to ask to come here?
Yes, Superintendent. He is saying that his name is Alejo Beni. that he come in peace. He says that he and his people will not be dependent on the settlement. They brought their food. They brought sugarcane, they brought plantains, they brought coconuts. And so he's saying that you do not have to worry about them, that they will not depend on the settlement. You will not have to pay for anything for them because they are independent people and all they require is peace and tranquility to settle on these shores.
Well, I'm very sorry, but I'm under orders. Great Britain is behind this, and they say no, because, well, we beat them, and they should be out of here and gone. And if they're not out of here in a few minutes, we'll get the soldiers and bring them down with guns.
Sir, he's wondering if you cannot appreciate the fact that he has a wife who is pregnant and is about to give birth.
What's that to do with me? Now, how can I possibly pay attention to such a thing? Take it away. Go away.
Kasa mege botula nigi wuguri le. Siabe tanyuru duri bela chukuba wom. Kasa wa duru bay. Wuguri. Bagara go bay. Bagara go.
Very sorry, sir. He hoped that you could appreciate and understand the suffering. So they are going back and determine what is their next course of action. After the Garinagu were banished to Roatan in 1797, they quickly spread along the Honduras coast. As early as 1802, they were already being brought to the settlement. 150 of them were brought to the settlement as laborers. The British at the time, were running short of workforce because their then slaves were running away. And so they knew that these people were on Roatan, and they brought over 150 of them in 1802. What we are depicting is not that time. We are depicting in 1823 when a larger group came over, this time to run away from the oppression in Honduras that were brought to bear upon the culture. And so, Alejo Beni and his people are coming back for a third time.
Megatina Lugebela Bafaraga to Ni, Lena Mura Belmo Gurile, at the Walu Hanyano Garinagu, Wallet. No how Wagum, no Wabugunu of Faluma, no Dugu Gilibin, Lawfulessa Uguri, Casa Wadugu Boo, Casa Waduru Way, Siamba Ila, Bichugu, Uma, Boom. I don't know what it is. I did have the Uguri. Oh!
Superintendent is again requesting permission. He has indicated that they have brought their food. They're here looking for our fellow Garinagu. He has a pregnant wife. She's almost about to give birth. And he's asking to the intervention of the good Lord that you may find it within your heart to give them permission to settle in these parts of our shores.
Well, it just happened that we got papers coming in from Jamaica, from the government in England, and they said we should probably expand a little bit in towards the south. And so, considering the request and considering that they're indigent and poor, I think maybe we should ask them to move to the south. And then south they can set up their communities, and then later we'll see what we can do with them.
Sereme, Baba! Sereme! Sereme! You go! What is that? You go! Waluahenya Garinagu Walade.
Yes, they are grateful to you, Superintendent, and he has called the others to come ashore.
After the third attempt, the Garinagu were given approval by the superintendent to settle. However, the superintendent instructed them to settle south beyond the Subun River. In 1823, the borders of what we now know as Belize was not extended to the Sarstoon River until 1859. Therefore, in telling them to settle south of the Subun, the superintendent was giving approval to settle on land that was not yet under British control.
Some scholars and historians grapple with whether the date of the settlement of the Garinagu was in 1823 or 1832. I contend that it was 1823 for the following reasons. It is well documented that it was Superintendent Major General Edward Codd who gave the permission to settle. Major General Edward Codd served as the superintendent from 1823 to 1829 and was succeeded by Colonel Francis Cockburn, who served from 1830 to 1836. Therefore, in 1832, Superintendent Codd was no longer on the settlement. Secondly, the Garinagu were known to settle on Wednesday, November 19, 1823. In 1823, November 19th fell on a Wednesday. In 1832, November 19th fell on a Monday. Notwithstanding, what is in a date? The important thing is that the Garinagu settled on these shores.
In Honduras, they met severe oppression, and some made the decision to migrate to the British settlement. The arrival of the largest group of Garinagu is what is depicted in this video. The Garinagu has integrated well and contributed significantly to the development of Belize. Their ability to easily learn other languages and to easily understand new and complex concepts and impart knowledge made them sought after to provide public service. The Garifuna people has helped significantly as teachers, nurses, police officers, soldiers, public officers, and other sphere of public service. In 1941, in recognition of the significant contribution of the Garifuna people, and at the request of Thomas Vincent Ramos, the 19th day of November was awarded as a holiday in Stann Creek Town, now Dangriga. In 1943, the 19th of November was awarded as a holiday to the entire south of the country, Stann Creek and Toledo. In 1977, the 19th November was made a national holiday for the entire country of Belize.
In giving the Garinagu the permission to settle, the superintendent instructed that they should settle south of the Sibun River. In 1823, the Sibun River formed the southernmost border of the British settlement.
The 1859 treaty between Great Britain and Guatemala established Belize's southernmost border as the Sarstone River. In granting the Garinagu permission to settle south of the Sibun in 1823, clearly the superintendent was granting permission which he did not legally have to grant.
Having settled on the shores of what is now Belize, the Garinagu has integrated well into the Belizean Society and has contributed significantly, particularly as teachers and public officers. It is this recognition that motivated the colonial government at the time to grant the 19th day of November as a public holiday.
November 19, 1941, saw the first celebration of Garifuna Settlement Day in Belize, called Carib Disembarkation Day, and was founded by Thomas Vincent Ramos. In 1943, Ramos lobbied for a public and bank holiday and succeeded, but the holiday was granted only for the Stand Creek district. In 1944, the holiday was extended to the Toledo district, where the second largest concentration of Garinagu lived. And in 1977, Garifuna Settlement Day became a national holiday.
There are many discussion points relating to the Garifuna experience. To conclude this segment of Uraga Garifuna, Darius Avila, president of the Battle of the Drums, gives us some insights.
Like any other culture, the Garifuna experience is fraught with interesting folklore and discussions of survival. Some of those are as follows. Typically, the Garinagu established their plantations miles from their villages or from where they live. It is said that the reason for that stems back from their experience in Yurumein, St. Vincent, and to a certain extent in Honduras. Their plantations are a source of food, but also a source of refuge. When there were sustained attacks against the Garinagu, their villages would be burnt down, crops destroyed, and animals killed. In what would appear as a retreat or submission, the Garinagu would run to their plantations miles away. There, they had food, water, and a means of defending themselves if they were forced to. Because they were familiar with the immediate terrain, they could also launch surprise attacks against their unsuspecting enemies. Also, almost all Garinagu whose ancestors were banished to Honduras ended up having Spanish-influenced surnames, like Avila, Palacio, Ramirez, Nunes, and Lopez. Those were not original Garifuna surnames. As the story goes, when the Garinagu sought to integrate into their new homeland on Honduras, they invited their Spanish-speaking friends and neighbors to become the godparents of their young children at baptism. The practice at the time was to give the newborn child the surname of the godparents instead of the surname of the parents. Thus, the disappearance of traditional Garifuna surnames and the appearance of Spanish surnames. Finally, the Garinagu recognize themselves as a nation, and consequently, there are many attributes of the culture that speaks to nationhood. For example, there is the Garifuna flag, the proud black, white, and yellow. In his presentation, Sebastian Cayetano describes our flag as follows. Black. The black strip, which is located at the top, represents the black ancestry of the Garifuna people, a phenomenon that occurred in St. Vincent starting in the 17th century. This color, at another level, recognizes the hardships and injustices that the people have had to endure, their struggles for survival, and the odds that they have had to overcome in the course of their history. Yellow. The yellow strip at the bottom of the flag symbolizes the other half of the ancestry of the Garifuna, the Amerindians, or Yellow Caribs, as they were referred to by Europeans. These were actually a mixture of Caribs and Arawaks, and formed the host communities in which the fusion of Africa and South America took place, to give rise to the emergence of the Garinagu as a distinct group indigenous to the Caribbean region. In contrast to the hardships experienced in the course of history, The yellow symbolizes the hope, plenty, and prosperity, as well as the Carib Arawak input into the Garifuna identity. The white. The white strip, located in the middle between the black and the yellow, reminds us of the role of the white man in the history and formation of the Garifuna people. The forcible removal and enslavement of the African, the seizure of Garifuna land, which precipitated Garifuna resistance, and the forcible removal of the people from St. Vincent. At another level, white symbolizes the peace that has eluded the Garifuna people for most of their turbulent history, the peace for which they continue to yearn.
Ayo,